All right, guys, what's going on today on the operator's mic? I have my guest here, Matthew Mottola. Did I say that correctly? I
Yeah,
didn't even
nailed
ask.
it.
Awesome. Well, Matthew is the co-founder of Human Cloud. It's a Boston-based company that's helping businesses unlock the power of freelance and remote work. So Human Cloud is pretty much changing the way that companies are thinking about hiring, projects, and productivity, especially in this digital slash AI age. He's also the author of The Human Cloud and one of the leading voices of how technology is transforming the way we work. So Matthew, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stephen. Really excited to see what this future next 20 minutes holds.
Awesome, man. Oh, normally how I like to start, I like to hear just a little bit more about yourself and kind of what got you into running your own business.
So it's kind of all I know, not gonna lie. It's not what I was planning to do at all, as I'm sure most entrepreneurs know. And early on, I actually would like struggle with the word entrepreneur because I'd be like, well, that's not really what I am. I don't really know what it means. But so for me, I fell in love with, at first it was freelance. As far back as 2012, it was actually while I was still in college. But I really fell in love with the power of technology to disrupt work. And so when we talk about like technology to disrupt work, I actually started freelancing slash consulting. I did go like traditionally into the big four. And because of sort of falling in love with this freelance concept, it opened my eyes actually to the digital merit concept, which is thinking out like verified like ratings and reviews. So if you want to buy a product on Amazon, you get your ratings and reviews. If you want to go hire someone, we still have a paper resume. It just made no sense to me. And then kind of chasing that of like, hey, why is this so broken? I kind of just bumped into being a tech entrepreneur and still like didn't know what that really was. But if you wanted to build out that future, then you had to be a tech company, right? So I kind of like accidentally stumbled into building a tech company. And then because of that, that's actually, Stephen, why I was in SF at first, was I just kept chasing this one problem statement, which is how do we make work actually work? And for me, looking at these digital talent models just makes more sense. So I've been in that very narrow vertical my whole career. Everything from starting my own company as early as 2012, being early at one of the leading startups in the space, was at Microsoft in 2018, sold my last company in the space in 21, and then Human Cloud have been about for around 5 years. And this one I've done the opposite of the last. So I also like have been very quick to fail a lot. And so the venture route, if any of your audience is interested in what is the venture route, what's the goods and bads of it, it's never just good or just bad, right? But so I've also kind of navigated, I think, most sides of entrepreneurship now from inception to exit. And it's a painful journey, Stephen. So anyone that's doing it, hats off to y'all.
Yeah, so for someone that's just kind of starting out like brand new, what would you tell your younger self like how you would go about structuring like maybe how to get your first deal, maybe how you could position yourself a little bit better because I'm keep hearing like there's so many ways of going about it. What would you tell your younger self?
That's a good question. I would say that I wouldn't change a thing. With that said, it's going to take a lot longer than you think for absolutely everything. A lot of times the dream you have now, you're going to land like maybe 10% of the way that you think, and that's okay. And so I do think one thing I've always done really well from the start, to be honest, is I've always planned for failure, which I know sounds very counterintuitive. I'll never forget, one of my early mentors, serial entrepreneur, he was one of the ones that really set me straight in terms of, it's never so much about being right. It's more so about not like dying when you fail. And so from that mindset is kind of where I've brought everything. Even with my first company and everything I've done, it's always been a very, very kind of practical question of how much money do I need? How do I get that base? And then how do I swing for the fences? And with that said, it's always been very incremental buildups of value. And that would be the biggest thing that I always tell entrepreneurs is like, the world you see right now will be different than the world you see tomorrow and the next day and the next day. But there does have to be some sort of tie, meaning you have to have some sort of problem statement that's burning. For me, it's been the future of work. It's been how do I make work better, right? But then the actual applications of that, I never would have predicted I'm building what I built now. I never predicted what I would have built before, but I also was always super, super, super practical around how much money do I need? And when this thing fails, what's next? So Those are like, the only common things that I would say. What you do also kind of depends on what situations you have. So if your dad happens to be the CEO of IBM, that's great. Use it, right? If your parents happen to never have gone to college, all right, it's going to be a tougher route, but that just means you're going to have to work harder and you'll probably end up in a better place because of it. So it's very contextually dependent, but as long as you don't die, usually you kind of figure out a way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people tend to think that there's like one answer or one best way to go about doing things, and I think that couldn't be farther from the truth. When you see, on Facebook ads and everything, you have these like, "Hey, we have the structure that's going to get you, X, Y, and Z in 30 days." Like that's great, but expect an upsell into coaching because nothing ever goes as planned, right? That's that's pretty much how that goes. I don't know what your thoughts on that, but I always love asking people like how they feel about all those like $7 Facebook buy ads.
It's an interesting, yeah, not a fan. I really is funny. I just got off talking with one of my like our early, team members. She was asking like, how did some of these deals get done? And I'm like, honestly, there's nothing you could put in a book. And even if you look at some of the early companies like Google and Microsoft and all those, look at their inception story, and there's just a lot of things you can't replicate, right? Even things as I mentioned, like I'm kind of joking, but not really. Of like who your parents are really, really helps. If Gates didn't go to that school in high school, he probably never would have saw one of the first ever computers, right? Like he
Right.
probably would have been like me or you. So there's a lot of circumstantial things that can happen. With that said, I will say one of the things that I noticed early on was that you do have to have one of two things. You have to either be able to build or you have to be able to sell. And then the second thing is you have to be really good at a skill or really good at an industry. I've yet to see an entrepreneur who can really just combat that. And I will say, I think the data says the best entrepreneurs are actually between the ages of like 38 to 45. That makes total sense to me.
Mhm.
When I was in college, thinking about like, oh, what am I going to build as an entrepreneur? You really have no context unless it's like a social app, right? Or like we all know that you're going to make like a checkout app with your friends, right? Or something like that. So, right,
Yeah.
like whatever you do, and this is one of the things I do tell entrepreneurs is like, it's not bad to have a job. If anything, actually, you learn the most when you have a job. And if you want to build, enterprise B2B software, like you probably should have had a job to understand that industry first. Like I said, there's ways to skirt that. But yeah, man, I think it's different for everyone. Don't listen to Ty Lopez. Right? Like probably Tim Ferriss as well. Most of that stuff is just total crap. If someone's selling you a course, I don't know. It's usually not a good signal.
Yeah, I mean that's always tough just because they have such a big influence, and I think sometimes even with like personal branding, that's just such a big thing. It's just like you build such an audience that it's almost easy to sell because your face is behind everything, and people eat up your advice. So no, I love that. So then in terms of just like now that you've already had a couple businesses, you've tried, you've failed. Let's talk about Human Cloud a little bit more. Where did that come from, and just kind of like what kind of clients do you serve? What kind of clients do you actually like to work with? I know it's a big one. You can't accept every client, but I'm curious to know just a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so I'll start with what we are, and then I'll kind of get into where we came from. So we are a technology platform. We help companies come and find and vet and deploy flexible talent solutions. Now, I wish it was as simple as saying that. What we really are is we ride and die by the 2,000 plus flexible talent solutions that are really, really good but struggle to scale across large enterprise environments. And so in 2012, my eyes opened up to freelance. In 2018, I was at Microsoft helping us as well as our customers scale their flexible talent workforces. And I've always been on this, honestly, this central problem statement for forever, which is how do companies scale their flexible workforce? Not to get too boring, but the flexible workforce is usually something like a gig model, a freelance model, a fractional model, increasingly AI digital workers. And so if you've heard of like Upwork and Fiverr, those are freelance marketplaces. There's actually 800 plus of Upwork and Fiverrs that are specialized in specific industries, regions, skill sets. And so what we do is we help companies understand which ones are best for them. And we use technology for that. We
Mm.
also are kind of a media company, kind of a consulting company, because if anyone's ever run an enterprise company, you know that you need a service layer. And most people actually just want to pick up the phone or email someone and say, do this for me. So that's us. In terms of how we got here, because we're not venture backed, it did all start with a book and then consulting. And that's why I say technically we've been around since 2012, but Human Cloud as a brand entity, it's been more 2020. But yeah, that's us.
Love that. So it started with you, and you said you have a co-founder. You do have a small, pretty lean team. Like, how do you guys go about just kind of distributing some of the duties that you each have now?
Well, that's a good question. So we have two co-founders. We have a couple employees. We have a pretty massive contractor network. True to form of flexible talent, right?
Mhm.
I I actually can't imagine, Steven. That's one thing. I mean, I know it's going to happen, but I can't imagine having real employees at a startup. It just kind of cracks me up. Technically, yes, like we do, but we're very flexible talent focused. What I mean by that is like if we have a new person, they always start as an independent contractor. We don't just go hire employees for things. So so that's kind of our team, fully remote all across the world. We actually do have some colleagues in Asia, over there in Europe as well. And in terms of how that formed, in my experience, you take a problem statement, you see who'll pay for it, and you just run from there. For us, one thing we've done really well is we've adapted to the market. In entrepreneurship, you can never really control timing. You can kind of control your product, kind of, but timing is one of those things that's really tough. And so for us, because we aren't venture backed, we were able to kind of navigate with different models. And so it's funny, we started as a tech company. We learned we quickly had to be more of a media slash consulting, and we're now actually evolving back into a pure tech company as well. But it's been 5 years, man. And 5 years of you just keep getting your ass kicked and find a way to stay alive.
I feel like entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. Really isn't.
I don't recommend it.
Yeah. Honestly, what do you feel have been like some of the characteristics, or I guess that you've developed on in this journey? Because I feel like we said, it's not for the faint of heart. Like, what do you need to have to be able to, I guess, withstand the ups and downs of entrepreneurship?
It's a good question. I think I've noticed, and I'll give more so what I've seen from my successful like entrepreneur colleagues, friends. I think you have to be ruthlessly optimistic. Like when the world is burning, you have to somehow like have the belief that it's okay. With that said, you have to also be insanely realistic. So if the world's burning, you can't look and be like, "Hey, the world's not burning." You have to literally look in the eye and be like, "Okay, the world is burning. I think this is why. This is what we're going to do." Related to that, analysis paralysis. I think the biggest thing that I see from like non-entrepreneurs and executives in where they struggle when they start to be entrepreneurs is analysis paralysis. I think the reality is you're going to be wrong about 99% of things. And the only thing that'll sink you is if you just don't do it. And so in entrepreneurship is literally about how do you keep moving. One decision making framework that I live and die by is kind of like the two door logic, where there's two doors for every decision. And one door you walk through and you can walk back. The other door you walk through and you can never come back. As an
Mm.
entrepreneur, and this just comes with time and age, to be honest, is you're always trying to have to decide, is this decision, is it door one or door two? If it's a door two, meaning you can't walk it back and you're wrong, you're screwed. Like that might sink your company, right? And that's like a really
Mm.
dumb decision. That might be a tech stack decision. That might be a partnership decision. That might be an equity decision. There is some decisions that ride there. With that said, most things are at door one. And it's more so about if we take this route, is it going to be longer, slower, more complex? In most cases, the answer is yes, it is going to be slower, longer, more complex. But as an entrepreneur, you just have to do it and figure it out. But I'd say, that balancing of realistic and optimistic is huge. The last thing I'd say, which I think separates what I would call is the long-term entrepreneurs versus more of like the solopreneur side. And I think there is a core difference. There's nothing wrong with being a solopreneur, having a business that's just you. Like that's awesome. That's a fundamentally different thing than being an entrepreneur that builds a large business and goes down that path. Those are two totally different things. If you want the larger business route, you have to be insanely good at being able to motivate people, being insanely selfless, but also not getting burned. And so the ability to get people to rally around your cause, but also look out for them. So one thing I have seen is, especially like younger entrepreneurs, they'll expect things like, "Hey, do this free work for me." And it might work. Like it might work for your first company, but then 10 years down the road, your reputation is shattered because you were an a-hole. And that like that's true, right? And like that
Mhm.
doesn't come out until 10 years down the road. But I think knowing what kind of entrepreneur you want to be, and if you do want to be the one that builds large companies and brands that stay forever, that ability to be really, really selfless with people and put them first, I do think it sounds really cheesy, but I do think it's crucial to long-term success.
I love that. No, that's great advice. And I feel like even myself, I didn't really understand the difference between a solopreneur and an entrepreneur for the longest time until, you start seeing other businesses and entities, just kind of exactly what you just said. Awesome. Well, tell me just a little bit more now. Now you're working with so many people. Not only are you partially responsible for them, but vice versa, right? You guys are all working together to really keep this alive. What do you feel are some of the biggest challenges that even you guys are going through in your business after even all of your experience?
Yeah, I mean, so we're recording this in early October 2025. It's a hard time. It's all I'm gonna say. It is not as easy as it was 5 years ago, that's for sure. It's a hard time. I wanna make sure I recognize that for everyone. I actually think we are positioned best than a lot of my colleagues right now, and it's still hard, so that's one. The second thing, I'm sure all entrepreneurs have felt this or feeling this, you name it, is the burden of people's livelihoods on your shoulder is just so hard. Like there's no other way to put it. It's something I lose sleep over. Like and this is one thing that is also different is if you're the entrepreneur who's like single and doesn't have responsibilities, totally different than the entrepreneur with a family and then kids, right? So
Mhm.
make sure to recognize like the risk profiles. But honestly, Steven, that's what I lose sleep on most is more so just how do I ensure that the people that have taken a risk on the companies that we built, how do you make sure that they are well compensated and get what they deserve? That's what I lose sleep over. Every other thing, to be honest, I've been in this long enough that it's just kind of like ruthless rationalization and pragmatism. So like, there's core business principles. You have to have people that actually pay. You have to have more people paying that than stop paying. You have to have more people paying than you spend to get them, right? Like that's kind of basic stuff. It's the losing sleep over having to pay people that personally I just like I don't know. I don't think there's an easy way to get through that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I spoke with someone else. They're a father, big family, and that's always tough when you have to be just on the road or yourself. You travel like I don't know if you're married with kids or anything, but yeah, I mean, I'm married with kids, and it's not easy. But in terms of losing over sleep, over making sure everybody is paid, do you guys feel like you're at a point where you're scaling the business or just slowly building where you guys are at right now?
Oh, that's a good question. We are and I think this is the way I would describe us, and I'd say that a lot of companies are very much like their founder as well. So look at like why companies are the way they are. Usually look at the DNA of the founder, and you'll see why. I'll give the example of like Microsoft, right? Like why is Microsoft the way it is? I won't get too deep, Stephen, but like look at Bill Gates, and you'll see why Microsoft was that way versus some other tech companies. But so for us, because of the conditions, we've always been a 15 to 30% year over year growth company. With that
Awesome.
said, in our industry, it's always, and we actually reflect the industry. Our industry has always been like a 15 to 30% growth industry as well. We've seen crazy hype cycles. So, like during COVID, we saw a crazy hype cycle. We saw venture backing of certain companies that were even up in the 40 millions. And a lot of that was just hype. But with that said, like from honestly since 2016 our industry has been a very very stable growth trajectory for us. We in current state, as I mentioned, October 2020, we have allowed ourselves to take some big swings. Now take some big swings meaning that we have enough of a good foundation that we know will be around no matter what. It's now so how big do we want to be? And so we are
Mhm.
taking a pretty big swing in being the standard for how companies find flexible talent solutions. With that said, we also have our bases covered in that if we swing for the moon and we miss, that's okay. We'll still land somewhere better than we are today, right? But so that's kind of where we sit. And I will say, I know we haven't talked about it, which is awesome. The ability to build today is so much easier And so for the
Mm.
past 5 years, part of our data infrastructure was honestly just a spreadsheet because the actual infrastructure itself was what's important, not necessarily like the amount of data. That's a very technical way kind of to put it. Because of that, we didn't spend that much money on things like server costs and actually building out a tech stack. In the past 3 months, with where AI is today, we've been able to build a fully functional platform that does exactly what we'd need for less than, I'd say, less than $50,000. And that is unheard of in my entrepreneurial background. So I will say for you entrepreneurs out there, like now is the absolute time to build. Caveat that a lot of good companies are built through distribution, not the tech itself. Which that's one lesson that I've seen so many founders fall into. The tech is sexy, and unless you're building a deep tech product, that's usually not what determines how successful you'll be. But yeah, that's where we stand. We might, I don't want to eat my words. We might do things like take venture if we need. I don't think we'll need though, and we do have some really good partnerships coming up as well. But yeah, that's kind of where we sit.
Awesome. I felt like you answered one of my questions because I always ask where the industry, what industry trends are and everything. But I love that it's pretty consistent that you guys are pretty on par with where you're at. A fun one. Just what are some of you guys' goals within the next 6 to 12 months? I know it's kind of a ways to think away, but it's always good to be optimistic, right?
So we have you'll see the brain of a tired entrepreneur that hopefully is helpful for your listeners to hear. So, and I've seen everything from like building big tech at Microsoft, right? Like the best of software development and the best of project planning and you name it. So what we always do is we pick out best case, worst case, and then we pick our goals based off that. We simplify our offerings into less than 3 tiers, and we separate our actual customers into one. So for us, our goals are really, really simple. We need 100 solutions running on Human Cloud by January 1st. That's it.
Mm.
That's literally the goals. With that said, we do have 3 tiers, as is with typical software. So, the expectation is we'll have 5 in tier 1, we'll have 10 in tier 2, and then 100 in tier 3.
Perfect. So yes, because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, even myself, I did this every single time I've started a small business on the side. I try to set like a financial goal. I try to set how big I want to grow. The typical solopreneur goals. What would you say to that? Just like completely throw it out the window?
No, I mean, try it. Try it. It all depends on the founder too. So I am one of those founders that goes by my gut and is really bad at numbers and is really dyslexic. So for me, like every minute I spend trying to draw up this master plan is a minute spent doing something that's really not like in my advantage. Now, if it were just me, I would have to. But that's where co-founders come in. Because if you look at my co-founders, they supplement all my weaknesses. So the lack of detail I have, they are detailed. The lack of, I would say, like they have massive risk aversion and they can get into analysis paralysis where I'm the exact opposite. They worry about things like, oh no, is it going to be a bad customer experience? Oh no, it's not fully done. I don't care. I worry about, are we being too slow? Are we not shipping? I think for me, the only metric that I've seen, sink a startup is momentum. If there's not momentum, then people leave, people get bored, you can't get through that trough. So for me, I just think momentum beats everything. Large companies would call it revenue. When you're in a startup, you're looking for every ounce of something to celebrate around. And that's also a part of you as the founder. If you're the first founder entrepreneur, I mean, you just have to get really good at celebrating little things as well, while not seeing the fire in front of you, because 99 things are broken and you have to be able to identify those things are broken. Can't just act like nothing's broken. That's just dumb. But yeah.
I just feel like I caught myself doing that so much. And then I have a twin brother and he runs a company. Well, he runs my mom's company now. And she was a cleaning service. My family's actually from Costa Rica, born and
Oh
raised,
man.
immigrant family. So we learned English here, all that fun stuff. And my mom started her own little business. She was the one that caught my entrepreneurial eye. But when my brother started running the business, he had a lot of similar takes like you. The business is like stop chipping away at things being so perfect and just get version 1.0 out there. And then you'll kind of see what you actually need to fix. So there's three things that I really picked up on what you said. And I think it's super important for our audience to hear. Number one, be ruthlessly optimistic in order to get this thing going and keep the momentum. Number two, you got to find the right type of people that could supplement your weaknesses, especially if you're working with co-founders. And then I think the
Even, you know what I'd throw in until you get there is,
go ahead.
listen, everything and everyone has a different background, different proximity to whatever it is that you're trying to get to. And like there is no one playbook. And there's things that'll help, but those things that'll help, that's not saying it'll make you succeed. So there's little things like cash is better than a yes, right? There's little things like real cash is better than venture. That stuff is helpful, but at the same time, I mean, you might have to go create a serial company to be able to get your app to run, right? You might have to go publish a book to get people in front. So everyone has a different story. In the end of the day, as long as you stay there and keep going, it's really all that I've seen matter.
Yeah. Oh, I just remember the third one was have that problem statement, have that burning desire to really fix that problem statement. That was like the recurring theme on this one. All right. So, problem statement, figure that out, be ruthlessly optimistic, and find the right people that could supplement your weaknesses. Cool. I'm glad I remember that one. All right, Matthew. Well, that's pretty much everything for today. I did want to say, is there any one last piece of advice or anything that you'd want to share with our guests?
Yeah, there's a quote that I would say I've always just kept in the back of my head. Do you know the quote that Elon said about when they asked him to describe entrepreneurship?
Oh my gosh. I remember hearing about it, but no, I don't remember the one that exact
So
quote.
he said it's like eating glass and staring into the abyss.
Mm. Mhm.
I would say it doesn't have to be that hard. You can start a lot smaller. I mean, I'm not trying to create rockets or anything, but like it doesn't have to be that hard. But with that being said, all entrepreneurs have had that moment where you're literally just chewing glass, staring into the abyss. If you haven't, good for you. That's great. I'm jealous, but everyone that I know, we've had that moment. And honestly, Stephen, I would say don't be ashamed. If let's say you're literally a month out from rent, let's say that you're about to start selling furniture on Facebook Marketplace. Like I've seen it all with my founder friends. Don't be ashamed with some of the stuff that you have to do. It's just part of the process, and most people won't understand it. So, but you will, Stephen. So go talk to you, and you'll have them figured out.
Awesome, Matthew. Well, I appreciate the time again. Thank you so much. This was extremely insightful. And yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to where Human Cloud's going to go in the next 5 years from here.
Man, thanks for having me, Stephen.
Of course. Have a good one.